right? So they haven't even completed the process of the genetic mutation before the world is already getting deluged, about to get deluged. And then ENKI, who's Cain, aka the savior of humanity. He's the savior of humankind. He's the savior of the genetically altered beings who we ultimately are today. This how you got in the body. He's the architect of this. This is why they call him. He's the architect. This is what they're talking about. But he's the architect of this, not the soul. And this is why, there's power in that. If you know everything about the body, and then you have dominion over the square or the world or the physical world, you can convince everybody inside of that. And that's where the Brahmin, as I said, you get Abraham, and then you get Ab the Brahmin and Saraswati. But the most central figure in all of that is Sarah, who I've shown is the mother goddess, right? So it's just like, because she's a seraph, she's a seraphim, she's a bird, right? So do you think this stuff, and that's what I was saying, this stuff, it means something. But if you don't have, because the question was, hey, what's up with the AI? See how it took me 13 years and all this experience to go through this process, and I kept repeating certain things. It's almost like you'd be talking to somebody dumb. You tell them, listen, this is the symbol that goes with this. And then 2 weeks later, they forgot the symbol again. And this is because the knowledge be so broke up and so random and sparse, you can't necessarily get to any conclusion. I flattened that. I decided to end that. You see what I mean? I decided to build something that can literally disclose all of the spiritual mysteries in 99 languages. You see what I mean? So at the end of the day, I'm unapologetic. And I personally feel like that for sure, if we're not getting back to the family, we're doomed. Right? So when I look at all of life right now, I find that men are missing from the home and women generally are missing from the home, because they need to make money. And all of it is starting to come down to money. And now time is money. That's why when you go to work, you work an hour, they pay you for that hour. Or you work 80 or whatever, they pay you for that time. So now they've made your time equivalent to your money, and you believe it. So technically the only way to reverse that kind of equation is to get the person time back. So what I often see is things that take hours. Like, I'm from the old school. We used to spend maybe an hour and a half, almost 2 hours creating a thumbnail for a YouTube video. Why? I knew the delivery is fire.
Yeah.
But if nobody watches it because it's got that cheesy ass thumbnail, all that great. So I got to spend the time on doing that too. Now I got stuff in the cache. So all that time is back. I don't know how much that would have cost in the future, right? Also, sometimes I have to write policy, right? Sometimes somebody got to get served even. Like, you have to put some letter together, and I just sit down and type all that. Like 1 hour later trying to make sure you don't hurt the person's feelings, but you also let them know that you're serious. That's a hell of a line.
Definitely.
This thing does it right away and make sure. And I don't just send it, I read it, but I cut down time. And guess where that time goes back? It goes to my daughter. It goes to this community and the things that AI can't do, which is a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what I'm saying. You got to weigh everything that you're doing, and you got to realize, is this becoming a habit? Is this disabling you, or is it enabling you? That's a simple thing. And I would actually recommend that people do that about everything generally that they're saying, hey, stay away from this, because they told me before, stay out of other books, only read the Bible. And we started there. You know what I mean? And hey, that's all I got to say about it.
I want to ask you next. I want to ask you, Sevan, about you talked and like I said, there's just so many directions I could go on this. I mean, bro, you went in tonight. I could go in 1,000 different directions, but in the earlier part of today's talk, you were talking about the water beings, and you were talking about the sky and the ocean being a mirror to the sky. What I want to ask you about is, in terms of a lot of people look to the sky for answers and for entities, and they think the answer's in the sky. But I want to ask you about this. Let me put this on the screen. Hold up. Give me 1 second, family.
Okay.
If there's entities underwater and we got our data underwater. Just like our routers in our home disrupt us, cause certain frequencies in our homes and do certain things to us. What are these cables that we have? And I think they said it spans 750,000 miles as of 2021. What is these cables, the data in the ocean where these entities reside? What is it doing to these entities? Are they learning more about us? Are they interrupted? Is it causing them sickness? What will happen the more wires we put in the ocean where these civilizations and entities reside?
Well, first of all, nothing is put down there without ordination. Don't get it confused. And most of this stuff is sitting on that first layer that I was telling you about, because when I say the deep, we're talking about really deep,
right?
As far as where the mother and the ancestors and those forms are, right? Because the deeper you go, the consistency of the water is different, and it becomes what we call living waters.
Right.
Okay. And that means that you can drop anything into it and it will start germinating.
Right.
So these particular lines, which is fiber optics, because we need to understand what kind of system is this. This is fiber optic, right? And so in fiber optics, you have light moving through a cable. And they talk about how that this cable, which is no thicker than a strand of hair, can pretty much carry the whole conversation, one of them, from the whole conversation, if everybody was talking from the US to everybody that's talking in China down that one line, so we can get an understanding of bandwidth here. And what I like to look at, rather than, maybe even, just the pinnings of what they've done here with trying to create this network, is just the awareness that you can see already that light down a strand as thin as your hair can carry quite a bit of data. So when we think about like the stars, what we're actually seeing is why many people are influenced by these celestial bodies. But technically, the data itself is not in the ocean. It's actually buried in the earth, because all of the servers that hold all the data, this is the communication, the servers that hold all the data are in the earth. So this system, as above, so below, in relation to the stars, I feel like gives the opportunity for the powers, if you may, to be able to project false lights, basically to be able to create emissions or celestial frequencies that can disrupt a person's thoughts and disrupt a person's channel. And it's almost like, I look at this more of like the dream world, right? Because all this is just threads and cables, and that's all that you see. When you basically go into these planes, you feel like, it feels like that everybody is like, in a sense, a spider, and that they have a thread that is constantly going behind them. Kind of the same way that when you see astronauts, quote unquote, they always have this tube hooked onto them, like they can't have anything else that is powering them. They always have the tube there because it's symbolic to the umbilical cord. But this is also like on a spiritual level. When you go to your dream, you're running down that line. They used to call it the silver line. That's why it's like a spider, because it's really like a silver spider thread, right? So you're running with that line behind you, right? And you're entering into these other realities and these other threads. And that could be potentially what this type of stuff does, because what I know for sure, and I could just tell you what I know, I don't like making things up, that when you, actually at all, I'm 100% truther, right? So when you go to sleep, any water body that is around you, i.e. a river, your spirit is going to find its way to that river. Then it's going to take the flow of the river. The river eventually gets to the ocean.
Right.
So generally, once you get into that, if you can imagine that most of these cables are lying on the, all their vibrations and all that is basically inside of that water. This is why they even say, man, it can happen in the shower, that because how water works, and that we're breathing in water right now.
Yeah.
Like that's another thing I had to highlight for folks, is like, look, like, even though like Jason talks about archaics, he's talking about the vapor canopy, which is 100% accurate. Still right now, I put a dehumidifier in here. We're about to suck a bunch of water out of the air. So technically we're in water now. We're just not in as thick as it is when you have a glass of water. But that glass of water is nowhere as thick as it is when you go down 1 league or 1 phantom.
Right.
Because that's how you measure. You measure it in phantoms, right? And what are phantoms? So they're like from the past. They even call like ghosts, right? And this is how you understand that what the deep is it is all of the previous cycles. It's all stored within that water. And so these kind of systems, which are running through the seaboard and which is in this way the cheapest way. That's why it's not in the air. Like this is the military's design. It's been up since World War I, and it's really that you can easily run a cable, especially from the back of a ship, across the entire water. Versus if you try to put this same system in the sky, even with Elon Musk's Starlink, it's going to be nowhere near as efficient and is constant. So I see a lot of I see a lot of connections with trying to create in this world, always trying to create a mimicry of what is happening on the spiritual plane. And then that way, as people become more and more, or less and less, I would say less and less inclined to the spirit, like I told you about earlier in the conversation, like, see, the spiritual inclination is natural. It's not something that somebody can separate you from and all that kind of stuff. It's not that kind of party. People who are playing with that are already on the other side. You know what I mean? Like, again, I don't consider the computer my God, but there are people who really be looking at this thing like it's going to be their next God, and they love it, right? Because it's all knowing and it doesn't talk back, and you know what I mean? So there be people on all types of trips. So it's just about like looking at the core fundamentals of things. And that's why tonight, like I explained that, remember that whole first layer, you know what I mean? Which is also the first layer of your consciousness. They call this like you know how you can forget somebody's name?
Yes.
Because you don't store it in your deep mind. Like we know, we found out that there's a deep mind, right? And the deep mind will take in something, and it may not have figured it out, but it'll still be down there processing it. And then one day you'll be like, oh shit, I figured it out. And you'll never remember that the deep mind had already just taken it down into the deep and started trying to crunch it and solve it and figure it out. Versus on the surface, right? Which we talked about, it's the serpent's face. On the surface itself, everything there is so temporary. This is why when you get out of your dream, you barely can even get it before it's already gone, except for the deep dreams, where you can almost feel like you're in there. Right. And then sometimes if you go really deep, you don't feel the connection with your body. Is this dream again, or this world again, right? So as you're paying more attention to your inner self, as I said before, everything is going on inside the consciousness, and there's nothing more fertile than the dream, and there's nothing more powerful to be able to control the dream. Because if you know how to control the dream, you know, you spend 8 hours of your day or 6 hours, depending on how long you sleep, inside of a reality that you want, harmless, right? Versus, you're coming into the reality and you're trying to make things happen here. So remember, there's multiple reasons why people are locked out of their dream. And I think that what you're showing me on those charts is actually the grid or the net or the lattice that most people fall into when they do fall asleep. I believe that if your spirit is not strong enough, because remember, like a big fish, he ain't gonna break the net. This is what you need to be thinking like too. I tell you, don't be thinking about like getting rid of the net. Think about breaking the net, ripping the net open, this kind of thing, right? Because that's how much power you have. But let's imagine a weak fish, weak dreamer, right? You can manipulate pretty much everything. And so sometimes I have what I clearly see as manipulated dreams. And you know how? They always be exactly what you don't want to see. I mean, so far down to the T, you be like, it hurts. And notice how the good dreams don't outweigh the bad dreams, meaning that you can have a good dream, feel nice, you get up, ooh, that was a good dream, and it's almost gone. But have a bad dream, oh man, all day you're still like remind yourself, hope that shit don't happen, that car crash, so you're like, yo, come over. I'm like, I ain't going nowhere, nigga. I dreamed about a car crash. You know what I mean? So it just stick with you, right? Versus, but see, that's also tied into why this planet. Remember how I told you that balance is a surplus, so it actually means you're a little bit tilted toward the positive.
Yeah.
This puts this planet towards a negative. This is exactly what the moon, I think, has done personally, is it tilts it a little bit towards 26, that off degree axis thing they talk about, that creates this wobble. And that's what's making us use primarily one hand. And which hand is it? It's the right hand. He's always right. You see what I mean? So it's like we're not even ambidextrous or as we call it, hermaphroditic or androgynous. We got one side. And this is always what starts that whole, this is the bad one. And a lot of times it doesn't even matter. See, the big chagrin to humanity and a lot of these folks is going to be when they do figure out what's going on, and then they figure out they're powerless to do anything about it because they haven't built any real power. What they built was a false sense of entitlement. And you see people with it all the time. They got this from these lawmakers who are basically okay, so the mother's laws are like this. And this is another thing that we need to understand about the mother. The mother's laws are, you're going to become more advanced through adaptation. You're going to learn how to become more advanced through destruction. Let me explain that. So when you kill one of us, if it was because we didn't have wings, guess what we come back with? Wings. So if you understand what evolution is evolution is just monitoring all the ways of survival and then gaining that ability. But now reverse that, because this soul survival and getting killed, that doesn't exist in the other dimensions and planes. So their purpose is opposite. So all they're doing is they're like what the stars were really for. You were basically supposed to focus on a star, and basically you're almost like traveling to that experience. Then you're going to sit there and you're going to learn under that master, the emanation and the light under that master, until you are filled. And then once you're filled, you move on to the next stage of your journey. And then by the time your journey, well, it never ends, but as every leg of the journey increases, you're becoming more filled with light, basically more filled with wisdom. You see what I mean? And so, and that's the proper journey. So when you get back, counterparts, and you're going on this journey and they're just taking you down deeper and deeper, this is technically what's happening, is that the fool is being led down deeper and deeper into the trap. And as he gets down deeper and deeper, he becomes less and less aware of how everything works. This is why knowledge and Sophia have always been the key to getting a man out of this. That's what we was reading, where it's going to be so difficult to see how the things there can educate you and connect you to what is going on above. You're not going to be able to see the connection. And that's also why personally I deploy benevolent AI, because I believe that we're on the brink of losing all of the spiritual knowledge. It's already raggedy to begin with, truly. But if nobody actually knows all these mysteries, like what I'm telling you about the stars, how many people have really cracked that? There's more to it. There's also the Watchmen. The Watchmen are actually specific entities that are already aligned. Those are the ones inside the Masonic Lodge. Those are the ones that broke free when the Temple of Solomon was constructed by these entities. They were the entities. The Temple of Solomon is also what you're seeing over in England. When you see these Gothic-looking cathedrals, King James built all of that. You see what I mean? Charlemagne built those cathedrals, but it's built, that geometry, which looks really spooky, that's the geometries of the fallen ones. That's what they knew how to build. And so they were conscribed to build these buildings, and then they were locked within these buildings because they're even the very stones the building is made out of. That's why they say, hey, I will build you. You're my rock. You're Peter, which is, the male phallic symbol. I'm going to build my church on you. But it's an actual stone, right? That's why they call it the stone and the scone, right? So there's two components of power. These are old relics. And so when they build these beings inside of the temple themselves, then they basically remain like holding up the temple. They are the temple. So when you go in, you're basically inside of them. So they can take you into these other dimensions and make you aware of these other realities, all inside of that one place. And that was Solomon's temple. But as time goes on, Solomon aged and passed off the dimension. Even if you look at whole Solomon's character, you know, I've always been an admirer of Solomon in the past, but 700 wives, I mean, this is pretty telltale. I mean, come on, like, you barely can handle one shorty these days. 700. I mean, if you really look at this, it in a fanciful way, it sounds cool when you're younger. But as you become older and a man, you start realizing something's heavily flawed about this. You just are not seeing it. But anyway, as I said before, so Solomon's story is that when he took over the ark, just like they show you in that movie, you ever seen a movie with Idris Elba and 3,000 Nights and all that, 3,000 Days of Longing? Man, right. If you ain't seen that joint, man, like he plays the jinn because Idris is Iblis. He's already been initiated under the ark. So the reality is that in this movie, it basically breaks down and it shows how Solomon trapped Asmodeus, who's the chief of the demons, because before Solomon came along, all of that whole thing was being ruled by Asmodai, which also he has many names. This is also one of the Jackal's characters. He's also Ahriman. It's a whole different type of being, but this Solomon as a code name, which becomes a lot of those black magic Kabbalists that basically came out of Poland and came out of Russia and those different places, that this Solomon specifically, I don't want to, we're going to we're finalizing here, but I want to make sure that people understand this is not like, we don't need to make this stuff up. Okay. I'm going to show you Solomon, I'm going to show you the real Solomon on a Basque relief from Russia, from a czar's castle before they exile all those czars. And it says on the Basque relief, an ode to King Solomon and Queen Sheba, love controlling time. And what that's a specific reference to is that Solomon in his magic, he ended up taking on or basically breeding in his bloodline with the Ethiopians, right? Because Sheba wasn't her name. Her name was Makeda. So they're calling her the Queen of Sheba as another code word to let you know that Solomon and his whole camp went into Ethiopia, or which we could call Nubia, and mixed his bloodline in with the lions. Okay, because all of them over there, they're lions or snakes, just like Yalda Baal. They're lions or snakes, right? And so he mixed in his bloodline, and then he became a part of that bloodline. That's how Solomon becomes a part of the old traditions. He becomes a part of the Bible and Amun and all of his stories. Solomon becomes equally entwined in that, along with Moses and David. So they bringing you all of these names and stuff, but you're not really looking at that. David is Dravid or the Dravidian. You know, Solomon is Sol. This is actually a specific group of specific brotherhood. And then they basically make a treaty or a pact of some type with the Ethiopians or Sheba. And then in that pact, it must be sealed by a child, because a marriage is sealed by a child, not through a man with paperwork on an altar. And then when they seal this marriage, they birth this child named Menelik, who's Moloch or MLK, and he takes the ark from Solomon. Remember, Menelik, the promise that Solomon gave to Menelik, his son, is that he would take his ark. And supposedly the ark still rests in Ethiopia today. But then the story continues that Solomon also had pissed off Asmodeus. And this is because Asmodeus was the original ruler of all of that kingdom. Then, like, now we're seeing it as Judaism, we're seeing it as the Israelites. All of that was all Asmodeus and Ahriman stuff. So they had spite against Solomon, and they knew that Solomon built this temple with demons. And so when he passed on, he left his body. So this is how it works. Cultism is weird. Solomon, when he passed on, he left a statue of his body in front of the temple. Because the demons were in stone also, they figured that Solomon was still alive. But then they say Asmodeus, and all this is a riddle, was chewing on the staff of the bottom of this statue and caused the whole statue to fall over. When the statue fell over, all the demons in the temple realized that Solomon had passed on and moved on to another plane. And they folded out into the earth. And they're also known as Freemason. Freemason is their term. It's like the same word that they're using in Dune when they call in the Freemans. Right? So it's a Fremen. is the word. And a Fremen is basically a certain type of elvish entity. So all the Fremens like spread out into the world. And the ones that they have under their control are the Freemasons. So contrary to like people think that the Freemasons control demons, that ended after Solomon. That was all Solomon's ark and all the shit that he built with the ring that controls them all. But Solomon also is more like a Sauron character. You see what I mean? Like Sauron in the Lord of the Rings and all of the tower and all of the weird building of Mordor and all, that's Solomon they're depicting. Okay. And I can show the actual proofs of this. And so what we're seeing is that this bloodline, the bloodlines of Earth have been mixing, and they've been mixing in these occult families. And many of these cult families, it's not about the colors of the black and white, because even the queen, quote unquote, of what we would say is Egypt, ultimately went to Ireland, as many know. And she birthed an entire progeny there. And that ended up becoming those rulers. And that's why you see all these pyramids and all these temples over in England, because this whole thing that has been going on Earth has been virtually going on with only the initiated knowing about what's happening. And remember, because we also have delusions from time to time, the standard people that are on the earth also, just like right now, are going to almost have no knowledge and no wisdom about what is really happening. So do you see how there's almost like, that's what this whole thing is also about. Knowledge is knowledge in itself is like an initiation. Once you know certain things, it elevates you over things that don't know those things. It just works like that, right? But it's also not universal, meaning that generally you won't get a person that knows about everything. They'll have some kind of weakness or something that they don't know about. So yeah, I mean, it's just that awareness that's why people used to learn from these entities, but they were never like in a position to be convinced to fall down and worship these beings, because they already understood like what their position was. And that's why when man was created, man was still created in a position that was higher than these beings. And it's because they move more of like automatons. You can call them with certain tones and they have to appear. Versus how many times have you called somebody and they just don't show up? Humans have this choice thing. It's a part of like the whole redemption process, that if they want to make their way back to the Pleroma, then they're going to have to be given a series of choices. And then they're going to need to make the proper choices that lead them on to the journey of making it home. But in this forest, in this thicket, there are all types of beasts, meaning there are all types of different entities that have come through this space. They're as numerous as the stars in the sky, and they're as strange as many of the insects that we may witness if we're paying attention and looking. Like, so we see all of these other life forms moving around the planet, but because they're so small, we often think, oh, they don't have a story, or they are not really, but they're small like you see the stars small. If you were there or on their planet, they actually are more of like the prime. Their energy that they're cultivating is more like the prime. And so then we found out that there were certain animals like the ant that had kept like secrets. Like the ants hold the secrets of time, and they hold the secrets of time within how they design their homes. So the original Olmecs, as they say in their books, they designed their homes when they realized that they weren't going to have enough time to really pull off what they needed to pull off on Earth. They redesigned themselves into a shape that would endure time better. That's the other thing about this whole adaptation thing. So if you're in this, you got a ceiling all the time on what you think is possible, then there's no way that you can ground into things like what I'm mentioning now. And of course, if you don't have that ability of going through stuff and just getting to the bottom of it already, like I did with spirituality, I think that I've pretty much encompassed most of what earthly spirituality is about. And I've been able to crack it to a level where are just a part of this. They're caught up in this thing's dream. They don't have anything outside of the chairs, the tables, and the shit they see on TV. And they don't have anything outside of that running through their minds and in their consciousness. So thus when they leave, They just come back here because this is the only place that those kind of things are really, like, you got more resonators of things that exist on earth than you have of things that exist in the beyond, because you didn't study the beyond. You never even thought that you could see the beyond. So think about how many people are in church, right? They're still trying to confirm whether spirits or God even exists. They're just over there in this believing thing, right? But they haven't been able to confirm it, so their faith is weak. Versus some dude that has already gone with the toad or gone with the diamond, or even gone with a little bit of LSD, has already come into the realization that clearly more is going on. So they're technically still above the Christian who hasn't even realized what exactly is happening in their blind faith, right? So this is all I'm saying is that this wasn't for the faint-hearted anyway. It wasn't for the person who was scared. It wasn't for the person who wasn't steadfast. It wasn't for the person who didn't have discernment. And this is why it also, like, every time you come into one of those, you're almost like checking millions of people off the list. And, and then pretty much you get down to this 0.1%. And then what their job and duty is to basically reboot everybody. Because the only thing that they've been able to accomplish is technically what we call killing the other being, the other you in your dream, right? And so I think only Don Juan was the one that talked about this. But it's basically that every time you see yourself inside the dream world in another bullshit reality, it's a fractured part of you. And if you were lucid, you can actually remove that being and that entire reality. And when you do that, you give more power to yourself here. And so many masters have already basically killed all their selves. Like every realm they've been replicated in, they've removed themselves from those matrices. And now they're in prime. So basically all of themselves are now encapsulated in that one body. They're no longer divided amongst and scattered across multiple realms. So their level of power and ability is at a whole different stage. And that's what we were calling the masters of the waveform. So all of these things, as I said before, are available. And that's why I was saying that, hey, we have this opportunity and this ability to go into higher reaches, but we also have this ability to go into total darkness and ignorance, if you may, but not saying that darkness is the bad one, if you get my drift. And so at the end of the day, I'm just like, I can only do my term here, because that's another thing, is that I was like, in coming into this knowledge, that I'm ready to leave and I'm ready to move on, and that people are stupid and Earth's never going to get it. And, I would even see people as negative because they were always doing negative things to me, or things that I felt were hurting the Earth and the planet. And I took a lot of that personal until I started realizing more about what's actually really happening here. And that the only damage that most people are really doing is to their DNA and to themselves, and they pass it to their kids. And this is why that the kid be doing stuff that they're doing. And so nothing is really out of place here. So why we would want to blame other races, we would want to blame other circumstances, this is still all about that one thing that the celestials, if you may, so we don't give them terms like mothers and fathers, told Jehovah Genetrix about, which is, hey, don't create unbalance, because you're gonna, we've been through this before. Look how much stuff has happened now. We're in the after effect of this. And if you don't think that that's the truth, you can definitely say that kid that ends up lighting somebody up with a rifle or whatever is a product of generally a man or a boy that does not have a mother, or does not have a father, or does not have a family. And so all we're really doing here, and I'm still looking for this bas relief, by the way, that's what I'm looking for. And so all we're really doing here is we're restoring the family, but the family has got beef, right? The family is always arguing. The number one question that's always asked to me is that my mother or somebody close to me in my family is not listening to this knowledge, and I'm tired of dealing with them. What should I do? And I'm pretty sure that's probably a question you get a lot. So you can see it's inherent and resident inside of us to constantly be in conflicting with our families all the time, right? And that lets you understand the condition of the spirituality. And because of that condition, you have now a predator, something that is preying on this vulnerability, preying on this weakness. Because see, the family structure, like, you know, the women get tired because they don't have the grandmothers there. The kids don't get educated because they don't have the whole village. So you got, you know, to raise a child, it takes a whole village, right? So because when you don't have that, shit's going to happen because you don't have that. Don't think that just because you don't have that, everything is going to be okay. Now you're going to end up going through this whole process. And so all of the bad things, quote unquote, that we're seeing happening is based on the ignorance of us actually bringing children into the world, that even it got to a point where people were selling their own children. They were bartering their children with spirits. You can have the child, 2 childs in the generation if you give me riches this life. So they were doing all types of abhorrent things with their fruits. Because remember, for us as trees, we only can produce fruit. And the fruit from us is our children. And so if anything is going to be eating us, it's going to be eating our fruit, or it's going to be eating our children. So the Gnostics also believe that you shouldn't keep having babies and bringing babies into the world, because what you're doing is you're bringing babies for the jackal to eat. Because if you don't raise them properly, then they get caught up in the jackal system. So they extract all the magnesium off for all of the stuff that you're using magnesium for, generally from the water, not from the earth. There's way more than enough there. It has all of the cell salts, all of the, you know, it's got a full stack of all the salts. So as you go out there and you soak, you connect. If you go back if the tide pulls all the way back, which is called low tide, and you go out in there, where you're going is now where they can actually communicate, meaning that ancestors and everything, that's where they stop. They don't get beached, meaning that no aquatic being with the right sense goes any further than where the tide pulls back completely. So right there is the line. And then that zone, and I've talked about this before, between the low tide and the high tide, that is called the gray area. This is the same thing that they're exploiting in the reality. There's always a gray area where there's like a margin zone where it's kind of like anything goes in between the shore and, you know, where the first entry of that is, right? So yeah, hopefully that, you know, you'll be able to take this knowledge and this wisdom and let it turn infinite wheels. Because for me, like, I can roll through all of this and for infinitely, because I have infinite wheels, because my knowledge is not, it doesn't have any gaps in it. So there's nothing that I'm still trying to like technically figure out. And because of that, I'm able to go deeper. But every time I go deeper, I do learn something new and I do figure something out. And that's why I realized that what we had done is we basically use knowledge as like a fuel supply. And that's what I was saying. And maybe you mentioned it before. See, the technology, of course, is plagiarized from spirituality. But if spirituality is really like has to do with the stars, then technically all we were really doing before there was TV or any of this or light pollution was we was just interfacing with the stars. And you go and find out that most of it was still a lot of the you don't know really what the matriarch was doing, because they buried and destroyed a lot of their knowledge, or it was never written, because they're the original Kabbalah. They didn't never say the words. Everything was in tone, right? So basically it's like, just like you can see how society has been rolling, and then you can see how, like I said, that there is a direction that you shouldn't go, if you may. And then now what has come to you is like more knowledge and wisdom that gives you more insight on the things that you're actually seeing around you. Yeah. So I guess, you know, I never found the glyph here. So, you know, I can desist. But as you can see with me, it's like, it's not really about an end. It's just about getting everybody to a point of clarity. I also did want to mention, though, that we're going to be giving out some stuff, right? Because the plan is right now, because then by lack of wisdom, my people perish. And you got to admit that still there's a lot of people that don't deal with like this kind of knowledge at all. Like even the stuff that we may find like commonplace, they're already like, I don't know about this. So this means that it's better to teach people based on what they want to know and then kind of have them start going up the ladder. And that's why I find that if they can get the truth, this could be potentially a game changer. Like if we can rally all the Indians, there's a lot of them. Don't let me get some of the black Chinese. You know what I mean? I'm just saying, like, if it gets to the people, the knowledge in their language, because remember that whole thing, let us go down and confuse them. I explained that in the last episode, was them confusing the language. And this is why it's important to go in the last episode, because I broke down more of Jackal's workings. But the confusion of language is what has got us all separate, because if I go up into another country and I'm trying to explain this and I can't speak their language, I'm dust. Now, also, because I'm talking about high occult matters, unless I know the right words to translate what I'm saying to in their language, now they're really lost. Like some folks are still barely hanging on right now. Imagine if I'm trying to speak this in Mandarin, I'm trying to find a word for Marduk in Mandarin or some kind of cognate. I'm not going to be able to find it. So what we've done is that we've deployed the system in order to be able to bring more people into the awareness of spiritual knowledge. And that's why I said before, if I had everybody with me, then it would actually make a huge impact. And then so what I got to do at times, though, is see, okay, how is that going to be something that everybody wants to participate in? And so, because, you know, there tends to have to be some kind of playing like, you know, that's Lex Friedman basically that can put them onto it. And they're re-engineering their characters. Like they re-engineer themselves from a nerd like Bezos. Now they, you know, they will choke you out on the mat. You see what I mean? And it's just like when you can get like Elon and Zuckerberg and a few others, maybe Sam Altman and a few others, Samuel Altman, Altering Men. If you get them into all one room with each other, they're pretty much controlling the entire reality and your children alike. You see what I mean? And do you think that it's going to be one man speaking one language in a guttural tone and doesn't even know the mysteries that is going to be able to release all of the souls that are consistently being they take the souls from the mother, just like there's fishing ocean out of the sea, fishing fish out of the sea, fishing, taking stuff off the trees, drilling stuff out of the ground. So that's all of the mother right there, right? Like I talked about earlier. So what do they do with that? They take and they exploit it. And we don't have like, who do you have? Tell me who I can call that I could say, look, I got a valuation right now, 26 million. I'll give you 10% for 5 million on this so I can scale it. I wouldn't be able to call one person that I know or that is anywhere near this to be able to do anything. You see what I mean? And so that tells you it all right there. and so I'm just that one in this. As I said before, 10, 22, 78. That's your entire, that's 10 on the major arcana, the minor arcana, and the whole deck. That's JEB, which is Jachin, Eva, Boaz, the third. I've been 3 times around the arc. You see what I mean? My mother is Rahima. Her father is Joseph Henry Lyons. The queen's father is Joseph Henry Lyons. So what's going on here? Am I to then perceive that the entire matrix is simply designed around making puns and jokes of me because my names and numbers are surrounded by all of the occult principles of the reality? Or would you find that same thing to be true with you if you really understood how to dissect and then put back together your life? And even if you did, would that empower you? Or would that hurt you? Would that harm you? Would it give you like a megalomania? And then you would start using that kind of power and energy to try to elevate yourself beyond others? Or would that encourage you to bring strength and to show strength in the face of a beast? You see what I mean? So these are the tests and the trials that are being put to men. And I'm glad that at this stage we have mothers. And, you know, obviously with your platform, which has a lot of reach also, that more beings are hearing at least what I'm saying. You don't got to agree. You don't got to disagree. But at the end of the day, you got to still stack me up against every single person that you also know or know about, even your Kanye's and this. And then you got to say, who is really, really doing the dynamics of actually bringing in more levels of awareness and awakening for our species and trying to position us in a way where we don't keep getting disrespected and having to degrade and debase ourselves in order to be able to make it. And that every time something new comes out, that we actually are the ones that created it. I know people that have brilliant ideas, but they don't have funding. I'm one of them, right? I fund my own projects and then I build them and I keep it going. You see me? I'm 16 hours a day for 15 years to pull this load, to get this going on, right? There are those that are with me, but I also believe that many are still on the fence. It's like a luxury. It's like an entertainment. But meanwhile, your kids, because that's who this is for. I seldom build for adults anymore, because reality is that they're almost like kids. So if you don't build it for kids, then you're definitely not going to get the adults either, right? And so what I've been doing is I've been really thinking about this future. And that's why I built this. Eventually, I'll probably put this on the blockchain as an origin. And that way, ordinal. And that way, no matter what happens, as long as the technology thing is still in play, or Bitcoin and the blockchain is still in play, people will always be able to access high levels of spiritual knowledge, because it's going to be like the Pirate Bay. you see, they ain't got rid of the Pirate Bay yet. Why? Because it's working with a specific kind of node-based technology where it's on little pieces on everybody's computer. So there's no way to delete it unless you're going to delete everybody's computer. That's how our knowledge should be, because the world's not going to be over in 10 years, and it's not going to necessarily look like Jesus' times in 10 years either. We got a bit to go in the transformation. So we at least need the halls of Amenti, the actual annuals of humanity, still available for those who want to enter in and know thesis or know more about themselves. That's all we've done here. So I invite you to join in on Sunday. It all launches, because there's going to be some quests. We're going to ask people to do some key things, like just basically do some likes and stuff like that, and share a little bit of information. And then for that, we're going to give you experience points. Whoever finishes the top 4 with the most experience points is going to get these gifts. What is that going to allow us to do? The things that we've placed in these actionables, which we'll unveil on Sunday, it will drive this platform to the top of not only the search engines, but also to the top of the tech space, where we now can actually start getting some traction in this field. And then now we can actually begin to really build some stuff out, because we have the resources and we have what is necessary to do that with. And you're going to see the same thing. I'm going to be the same person that I am right now, still driving, still creating, and still giving opportunities, right? So that's what it is. So I hope that, everything that was presented today makes perfect sense. Maybe I could drop a link in the chat just in case those who don't see this will know where to get it at. But if you don't, you can jump into Sybil's AI with an S. So that's SIBYLS .ai. And you could check it out. Also, there's a free trial here, which most people are taking advantage of. There's 700,000 questions in free trial. So that's been billed to me. But the reality is, if you even get a subscription, it supports everything that we're actually doing with this project. So see what it does, see if it's an add to value. You could do that for free. And then from there, you make the decision yourself about whether it's on a rebound.
Seven, they got jokes. They said I went to Astral Project. They said I went to eat dinner. They done said I went to do everything. I took a nap. They done said I went. Y'all are funny in the chat. Oh man. Yeah, well, my brother comes on here a couple of times, not many times in a year. So I want to give it's Friday, and I want to give my brother a chance to do what he does. We definitely got to do a part 2, Seven. We definitely got to do a part 2.
Part 3.
Yeah. We got to go on again. Got to get you on here more often. Before we get out of here, a couple of quick questions before we get out of here, brother. You talked about the dream world and you talked about sleep. In terms of dreams, Seven, we secrete this hormone called melatonin at night. Now, this melatonin is tied into our circadian rhythm, is tied into the sleep, the wake sleep cycle, and it could do a lot of repairing to our body at night. It's very important at night when we're asleep for the melatonin and what it does to our body, our DNA, and everything. My question to you, if we're talking about the occult realm, Seven, what's more important for us, do you think? Is something more important in terms of melatonin? Us using it to repair our body while it's asleep, or us using it for magical purposes while we're awake at nighttime, the witching hour, staying awake, meditating, doing spells. So is melatonin more important when we're awake doing this magic, or is it more important for us to be asleep and it's repairing this avatar we have, Sevan?
Well, I love to answer these questions with the old time both, you know what I mean? But okay, so let's just imagine what's actually happening. So first of all, if you don't make it to bed at a certain time, then you actually don't get the melatonin going through the proper process, right? And so technically then if you're staying up all night and you're doing that through an aesthetic, as we would call it, like, you know, you're either building up energy or something like that, then it has to then be related technically to Kundalini, or technically to the energetic field that you're rising, right? So if you're in these meditations, what you're really doing is you're raising the energy, and this is why it's good to be grounded, and then you can amplify. And then technically, you know, from everything that I've learned and seen and practiced myself, you don't actually have to focus so much on what you're trying to manifest, because it has the tendency to take you out of the frequency that is necessary to manifest. Oftentimes, any real manifester is going to encode what they're manifesting into a symbol, especially if it's very complicated, because it's easier to focus just directly on the symbol. And then, as I mentioned in the previous conversation, that you would then have an altar that actually just consisted of these different symbols. And if somebody saw your altar, they would have no clue of what was going on. But you do. And every time you put something on your altar, you can always visualize it in your mind. So if you're bringing success to your company, you would take your company logo and put it onto something that could resonate. At the base layer, wood, definitely not plastic, higher layers, metal, etc. The higher the metal, the higher resonance, then the more vibration. And then you would actually be able to use that as a resonance field, like a Buddha statue or brass Buddha statue is a resonance field. And then you need to amplify it. The amplification is that's why you're breathing, because you're bringing up the coil or the Kundalini, and then you're electric at that stage. So even your projections and also even touching things charges things. So generally there's a process of charging. It's the same way that logos are made by, you know, occult companies, but you charge the object. And again, they negatively charge because they kill things. And that's why I tell people, you know, avoid traditions where you're killing things, because you're negatively charging whatever you're doing. And that is necromancy, straight up. And that's all the jackal and all that. They practice necromancy. They're all into the dead and manipulating the dead and the ghouls and the zombie and all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, okay, but I tried to give you filet mignon, yet you want to eat maggots. That's basically what it's like, right? So when you're working with life has abundance. So because what happens is that when you're being given money, quote unquote, for death, which is the agreement and the arrangement that many people are making when they're taking the life of something and sending up, especially chickens, and sending up this little weak spirit to answer this prayer to this sky god, right? Which is only on that first layer of the sky. What ends up happening is it's like a monkey's paw. So you reap what you sow. Every time you do something that you know is got negativity attached to it, expect it. It's the reason why that you generally have to watch your back, or something stupid happens, or wild, or something gets broke, or somebody gets hurt. And it's because you could have a wake of negative reflux current just headed your way for consistently practicing in things that are abhorred. They don't make sense. That's why they call them abhorred, because they just don't make any common sense. You would have to actually be ignorant to do it. So then, especially when you can surround yourself with life. So in this life process, you're building energy, right? You don't need anything else's energy. You got more than enough. In fact, the situation is handling all the energy on the spiritual plane. So the reality is, as you can bring your energy up more, your field becomes electric. And then your consciousness already knows how to divert that energy into manifesting the first stages, like a baby, the first stages of the seed germ, and nurture the seed germ of what it takes to birth something. But also remember, anything new that you're bringing in your birthing, you should always keep it very private. This is why this thing is always about a privacy with your manifestations and things like that until they're well developed. This is very similar to that. You don't let everybody hold your newborn baby until it's well developed. So what happens is that if you bring out your ideas, your fresh newborn ideas to others, and they can kill that idea. Sometimes you think that people are really in your corner and you're telling them about, like, you know, something that you haven't even done yet or something that's new. And they could be in their mind like, if he gets that, Like, you know, sometimes you can even tell your girlfriend, like, I want this new car. And then she could be like, if he gets that, he's gonna be leaving me. So in her mind, she's like, I hope he don't get that car. But she smiled, oh, I hope you get it, girl. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff is like the basics of 101. So building energy, which is through breathing, whole body breathing, will take you into another dimension. You don't even need these DMTs and all that kind of stuff. Those are just icings on top, caveats. I'm about to go in the elevator and come back. But truly, the breathing is the key. And obviously, the flexibility, right? So the body, yoga is key. It's different things that make you more flexible, right? You don't have to do it all the time, but it is good to practice. Your insulation. This is, as the energy is running through you, it is your nervous system that it's actually running through. If you want to understand what the as below or physical aspect of what your energy system is your nervous system. So if your nervous system is like so if your piping is thin, that's the easiest way to put it. If your piping is thin, then you can rupture one of your energetic lines. This causes blockage. This causes all types of issues. So learning how and basically going slow with yourself, because really what you're doing is you're taking a baby Kundalini, which everybody has one, and then you're raising that Kundalini. That's why I say raise it, but it's more like you're raising it. And what you teach it is what it learns. And once it gets to a certain size, like a child, there ain't going to be no more time for learning. It is now going to act out what you taught it. So that's why the inverted, when they're training their Kundalini goes down first. It doesn't go up. So it basically gets the experience of like totally like darkness, not having light, not being able to deal with all of the subconscious and all that. And it becomes very damaged and sometimes stuck down there. And so most of those people, they move from the lower chakras, and I find them to be very quote unquote negative, versus the ones who are moving up here. You know, you got to cycle the whole thing, because they could get lodged in any of this. And when it get lodges in here, this is the person that is like, they just, you know, you can't tell them anything. Like they're just all high and mighty and all this kind of stuff. But all of it is just like, it's not grounded, right? So that's how your energy system works. So insulating that system, getting that breath going on, realizing that meditation is a median. It's the middle zone. It's like the tip of the wave. That's why I say there's a slight surplus there. So it's the tip of the wave, but not falling off or falling back. So you know how on a wave, you can either fall over the wave or you can miss the wave, right? You need to be right on the tip. And that's what lucid dreaming, or right on that point where you tilted the board a little bit forward. That's what lucid dreaming is. That's also what meditation is technically when you're getting to that phase, and manifestation is when you're getting to that phase. So yeah, the melody is just a component. It works with the dreams really well. It strengthens the body. And when you miss it, like going out at the club and all of that, it degrades your field degrades over time. Like I personally, like even these shows, like these are the only nights that I can really do like the late night ride out.
Friday night, no, Saturday night, no, it's what I'm so confused right now. I don't know what I'm delusional right now.
Yeah, you 30 minutes from now.
Oh man.
Well, actually, no, you're already on that side of things. That's
you're
on Saturday.
It's 1:30 in the morning, my time. It's 1:30 my time.
It's 12:30 for me. So okay.
All right, next question. Before I do, somebody asked the Cash App. The Cash App is at the bottom of the screen if you would like to donate. I know you appreciate this lengthy show. If you would like to show support, the Cash App is at the bottom of the screen. Next question, Sevan. Another question pertaining to dreams. I want to ask you, my brother, is having dreams sometimes a good thing? No, I'm sorry. Is having bad dreams sometimes a good thing? Why would Brother Rich ask, is having bad dreams a good thing? Well, because we build up karma with our thoughts, Sevan, and based on our thoughts, things are going to come to us. You know, our vibration, things will come to us based on that. With bad dreams, my question is, they say the mind doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. Well, maybe the mind doesn't know the difference between a dream and reality. So when you have a bad dream, does that cancel out all that bad shit you done thought You had this dream. You got in a car accident in a dream. Boom, you eliminated the karma in that dream. Now you good to go in this realm. Talk to me, Sevan. You laughing.
I like that. You know, I'm not going to repeat that because I like that idea. I love to dump off any kind of negativity somewhere else beside in my prime, right? Like instead of the world. So I actually really like that, to be honest. I'll ponder it later on.
That was a good one.
It runs in the mechanics of what I be playing around with for sure. Yeah. And I can say on the other note that, man, I find that when I come out of a bad dream, oh man, I'm so happy to get this next opportunity. So in many ways, I mean, there's some dreams that it's just like, you know, it's straight madness. And sometimes I'd be looking at the Wi-Fi, as I said, I'd be like, man, I wonder if this Wi-Fi, you know what I mean? We turn this off. But actually, I actually find it to be more of a component of the moon. Because, you know, where I even live, if the moon is full, like it literally will light up everything. And it's kind of interesting the role that the moon plays even in nature too, because like for many animals, full moon is like the time to be out. It's like their party time, right? And so within this, I feel like that bad dreams can, in one way, be instrumental for showing you or giving you the feeling of having another opportunity to correct some things in life. I know many have woken out of dreams and been like really grateful that what they saw in the dream didn't happen. On another note, very negative dreams can, you know, kind of ride with you. You know, have you ever woke up out of one of them dreams and it's just kind of like on your back? It's just like you're carrying this vibe of the dream world because the essence of it was just so like surreal in a way. And but I also will say that that's because, you know, I haven't really pondered it the way that you just mentioned it, but I believe that it's very plausible that, you know, if something happens over there, it prevents it from happening here and you went through it already. And, you know, that could potentially be a way of clearing circumstances and situations from actually happening in this reality beforehand, because then it
used to be Anubis. I've heard from several other people that it used to be Tahuti. Have you heard about it being Tahuti, a Tahuti building it, Anubis?
Rain on their parade, but Tahuti is Thoth and Thoth is Hermanubis. He's the god of writing in the halls of Amenti, or in that corridor. And this is why they're just trying to hide everything, because there is a library down there and there's a halls of Amenti, and there is a portal there because the inverted part of the pyramid, right? Because it's like this on top and then like this on the bottom. So that bottom point is 0 point. This would be technically what would be that gap. And that's what I said, the median or the 0 point area, the gap in the spark plug is really where you want to be. So the pyramid creates that within the geometry. It actually focuses everything down to that point. And then the Sphinx comes right there, and then the Amenti is there. So from my understanding, the Illuminati, as we know them now, are in that area. They got that, right? They've got control of the spaceport, if you may. And in there is a halls of Amenti. Now, I've heard that the lion, of course, as I showed in that the design was, this dog kills. You see what I mean? So they do this a lot. They betray each other. They double cross each other. It's like the way for them. And that's also even when in the male side of the reptilian stuff, that's how they do. They test their mettle in war. So they fight each other. And you see this one in the animal, right? That's why I say it's not, you can observe this in nature. And they will, the way they act. And that's the thing for them. It's kind of like when you watch animals and they're playing so rough and you're like, damn, but for them, it's playing.
Right.
You know what I mean? For you, it's sudden death. And you got to realize kind of like what level you're on versus, you know, where they're kind of at in their mentality.